Hello, welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Ben Ratliff, and I'm joined by my friend and yours, the Reverend Jared Nelson. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great.
How do you feel about the fact that as of today, when we're recording, we have now 75 overtures on the docket?
Just 25 away.
Man.
I'm going to fill in for Scott here to say, just 25 more guys and we can get to 100.
Yeah.
We're already in ridiculous territory. Might as well just add to it.
Yeah, there's a point at which it's impressive to have a lot, but I think we've actually crossed the threshold where now it's just disappointing not to have 100, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Scott is not with us today. He's doing the work of the church over in Atlanta somewhere, I think, at an airport hotel room or an airport conference room. I don't know. Where do they meet for these meetings? I don't know.
Yeah, some sort of a conference room in Atlanta.
Like a P.F. Chang's all day long, something like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, we're here doing the work. Scott sent us in his stead, and we are talking about the next chapter in the Book of Church Order, which is BCO 59. We are out of the full chapters that have constitutional authority in this section, but a little bit of this one has some constitutional authority. We're going to talk about that when we get to it. Jared's going to bring us up to speed because he was there when it happened.
Ooh, in the room where it happened.
Man, oh man. If only we could have gotten it live, but Polity Matters was still just an apple and a sparkle in our eye back then. So let's I want to start by asking a question generally. So the chapter is titled The Solemnization of Marriage, which includes a word that's very difficult to say, and so you just have to say it quickly. But we know that there was a chapter on marriage in the original Westminster Directory for Public Worship, and so that probably explains why it's here. But there's a debate that would be had is a wedding a worship service or not? And I think that conversation has some bearing on the fact that this is present in our directory for worship. One other thought would be just that we're entering into a section that's not elements of worship, right? So far we've been dealing with elements of worship, but now we've got 5 chapters on marriage, visitation, burial, fasting and Thanksgiving, Christian life in the home. All of that is just me setting up for Jared to tell me why things are the way they are.
I think it's in Smith. He says after section 58, chapter 58, these are things that are not necessarily corporate worship, but deal somehow with how the church functions. We may not see funeral as a formal called worship service that the entire church is invited to. And same with marriage. I think that's part of the qualification is the whole church invited to it. That would be a lot of cake, I think, for for a lot of couples to dish out. Can you serve the supper there? That would be something that you'd have to invite everybody to. So marriage, funerals, family worship. Hopefully, our dads aren't serving the Lord's Supper to their kids on the couch. So, but they do have to deal with worship elements or things like that. Within a wedding, you might have a hymn that's sung. You probably are going to have some sort of a message that looks like a sermon. So it's good for us to deal with this as pastors have to do marriages and funerals. So that's my theory of why that's in there.
That's good. I run into guys that talk, that'll struggle with dealing with a marriage ceremony as a worship service or not. And they like to lean... Well, I've heard of guys talking about they like to lean in the direction of it's a worship service, but their primary reason for doing so is because it gives them a principle that they can work with to say no to things. You really, I don't want Whitney Houston played in my sanctuary, and so we're going to call it a worship service so that I can apply the regulative principle to it. I don't necessarily 100% agree with that because I think your point is good. A question you can ask is the supper something that would be appropriate, or is the baptism, would that be appropriate in this context? That would be a fair question to help evaluate if it's a worship service or not. It doesn't mean it's a service the church can't call, right? Mm-hmm. Church can call Thanksgiving services. Church can call, prayer services, different types of things, and so it certainly falls into that category. But may or may not be a marriage. May or may not be a worship service. Anyway, age-old debate. Listeners, tell us what you think.
Yeah, I don't consider it a worship service, mostly because if they ask me to serve the Lord's Supper there, I can say no.
Yeah. Well, Nevertheless, here it is. It's good that we have chapters on these things, and I suppose you could also ask, where else would we stick these? And so this is a good place, just in the general life of the church, and how we do some of these things. So we're going to get into it, unless you want to say anything else as a preface. That was my only sort of preface thing, was why is it here? Mm-hmm. All right. 59:1. Marriage is a divine institution, though not a sacrament, nor peculiar to the Church of Christ. It is proper that every commonwealth, for the good of society, make laws to regulate marriage, which all citizens are bound to obey insofar as they do not transgress the laws of God, with a reference to Acts 5:29. Yeah, we have two sacraments, not more than two, and so marriage, though a divine institution in the very earliest chapters of the Bible, it is not a sacrament. And partly because it's instituted so early in the Bible, it is not unique just to the church, but to all of humanity. It's something that's given to mankind to make use of and employ for various purposes and reasons. I don't know, you may want to comment on that, but then we also want to deal with the first occurrence of the word commonwealth here.
Well, it does say marriage is not a sacrament, and I think that's accurate because a sacrament has to be something that is open to everybody. Everybody should be baptized. Everybody should take the Lord's Supper when they're a communicant member. Marriage, not everybody gets married. Same thing with like ordination. Not everybody gets ordained as an officer. Yeah. So we may call this even an ordinance. Some have talked about marriage as if it's a means of grace. I don't know if that's appropriate. People tell me that's not for ordination. I don't know. It has some similarities, though, in terms of being an ordinance, being something that we will talk about our marriages as if, we learn things about ourselves and our sinfulness from it. But we need to be careful not to say it's a sacrament, because then it seems like you're excluding the church from attendance at some of these, or being in a marriage for some of these. So I think that's the reason why we would not consider it a sacrament. One of the reasons.
Yeah, certainly one. Marriage belongs to society at large as well. It's not peculiar to the Church of Christ, though some marriages are certainly peculiar. I think we can all agree. It's for the good of society, and so the Commonwealth may make laws to regulate marriage, which we're bound to obey as long as they don't violate the Scriptures. That's sensible, right? We've talked about this to a degree in the past. Our society has rules for marriage. I don't know if we want to talk about the there's laws about homosexual marriage now in play in the United States. There's nothing requiring us to break God's law and those kinds of things. But
it does make an interesting question about the difference, if there's some distinctions between civil marriages and ecclesial marriages.
Sure.
And that may be necessary for something that's civilly considered a marriage that we ecclesiastically don't recognize, such as, multiple partners, or, there's articles that used to come out like 10 years ago about thruples and trying to get married. We wouldn't recognize those as proper marriages. But I think what can become dangerous is if you try to think of something as an ecclesial marriage, but not a civil marriage. Some people will ask you to do things like that because of, benefits that somebody has that they don't want to lose. So they don't tell the state that they're married, but can the church say that we're married? And I don't think that this is allowing for something like that. I think rather it's, making a distinction that there may be things that are against God's law that we don't recognize that the state does, but I don't think we do things and just don't tell the state about it. That's not the place that we're in right now in relationship between church and state.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So 59:2 gets into marriage related to Christians in particular, though. Christians should marry in the Lord. Therefore, it is fit that their marriage be solemnized by a lawful minister, that special instruction be given them, and suitable prayers offered when they enter into this relation. It's pretty clear. There's not a parenthetical here, and I can't remember the scripture right off the top of my head, but when Paul's encouraging folks in the ways of marriage, and he makes reference to a woman no longer being married, she says she should seek to marry, or she can seek to marry, but only in the Lord. So we marry other Christians. We're not to join ourselves with someone who doesn't also believe. And Now, this is not addressing people who may be in marriages and they were unbelievers and one is now a believer through the ministry of the Word. That's not what we're talking about. But if you're going to get married and you're a Christian, you got to go find a Christian to marry. Find a good, godly spouse, and then find one that's fit for you, and marry them.
Yeah. Now, there's some people that may have a problem with this, in that not in the marrying in the Lord, but that it should be solemnized by a lawful minister, or that it is fit. Now, this is language of fit, not ought or shall or something like that, because it could be the captain on the boat. It could be, a magistrate, something like that, and we would consider it a lawful marriage. I mean, how many? You have couples that come in, I think, that have had, been married before they were believers, come into the church, and we recognize that they are lawfully married. So it's not only that a lawful minister is the only one who can do it, but if it's happening within the church, I do think this tells us it should be a lawful minister. Minister in the directory tends to mean a teaching elder. So typically, most Presbyterians have not recognized ruling elders as having the authority to conduct a marriage. I'm sure there's some sort of two-office guy out there sometime that's made that argument, but most of the time that doesn't happen. This does come straight from the original directory for worship, so some of that language is taken directly from there, and so part of the reason why we have this language that's in there, although some have said maybe there's a case that ministers shouldn't be doing this. However, we've taken the Westminster, position that it is right for a lawful minister to do this.
Yeah. I wish that being a lawful minister meant that I was also the captain of a boat, but it seems like it only works the other way around. They connect as a lawful minister in that way. Yeah, special instruction be given, suitable prayers offered when they enter into this. This is certainly going to refer to premarital counseling, probably some amount of instruction in the actual marriage ceremony at the wedding service. Certainly not as lengthy as premarital counseling. Don't spend 5 weeks preaching in the wedding service, but you're going to address things that need to be addressed. You're going to pray for them before, of course, and during the ceremony. So these things are just around the solemnization of a marriage. Interesting that it doesn't speak to vows at all. Morton Smith mentions vows in his commentary on this particular paragraph, but it's not mentioned here. It's not mentioned in any part of this chapter. But that's typically what we associate with a marriage, is that we're joining together and we make vows to one another in the presence of the Lord. I was curious if you had any thoughts on that. I meant to go look up in Westminster to see the chapter on vows, and I don't believe it mentions marriage in there.
No, it's suggested in the appendix for a form of marriage, though.
Sure.
So,
that's right. Yeah, in the BCO appendix. Yeah.
Yeah, the BCO appendix. And I think the one thing that stands out here is it makes marriage sound very simple, and I think that's on purpose.
Good.
Marriages can be today very elaborate affairs. I think within the Church of England, coming out of the Roman Catholic Church, you had a whole mass that preceded it. I think this is an acknowledgement of there's some prayers, right? And there's some special instruction, and then they solemnize marriage. So it seems like it's very simple. I saw a marriage once where it actually was, they did it on a Sunday. After the church service ended, they just went up there, they prayed, took their vows, had some like a 5-minute instruction, and then everybody in the church was invited to the reception. I thought
that's awesome.
I kind of like that. Yeah, it was separate from the worship service, but it was so simple that it was just like, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Man, they saved a whole bunch of money in terms of rental property, and they just had like refreshments after the worship service. So if you're looking to save money, people will talk about it later as something that was cool, and you can do something as simple as that.
That's a good, compelling argument, by the way. Hey, people will think this was awesome if you do it like this. That's a really compelling reason to have a simple wedding. Of course, I speak as the father of 4 young daughters, so I desire simple weddings.
Yes.
All right, 59.3. Now this is the constitutional paragraph, and so I think I'll read the whole thing, but then let's just talk about the original sentence that it was before not too long ago, and then we can talk about what's been added and why it was made constitutional. So 59.3, marriage is only to be between one man and one woman, in reference to Genesis 2 and Matthew 19 and 1 Corinthians 7, in accordance with the Word of God. Therefore, ministers in the Presbyterian Church in America who solemnize marriages shall only solemnize marriages between one man and one woman. So the original paragraph was just the first sentence. Marriage is only to be between one man and one woman in accordance with the Word of God. I don't think we're going to get a lot of argument here, right? Like, this is pretty straightforward. If God wanted us to have more than one wife or more than one husband, he would have made more than one Eve for Adam or more than one Adam for Eve, but that's not the way it was. He gave one and one. One plus one is one, marriage in the scriptures, and there's the parenthetical references. Jared, why don't you tell us? So there was an overture brought, was it 2017?
2018.
Okay, that came to make this whole chapter constitutional. You were on overtures that year. Why don't you reflect a little bit for us?
Yeah. There was an overture to make all of Chapter 59 constitutional. I think that's partly in light of Obergefell. There's also some chaplains who really like the idea because they would be asked if they would participate in some things, whether they were solemnizing a marriage or asked to participate in a marriage that was between same-sex couples. And they would say no, but they wanted to be very clear that their denomination says, I cannot do this, and they can just present the paper, and that way they're not pressured on it. And so that's when this came about. But it seemed like every single section had something somebody wanted to wordsmith. So the 59.1, some people who wanted more liberty on between church and state, wanted to work through some of those issues, wanted to wordsmith that. There was 59.2, some people thought ministers shouldn't be doing. There's like one person that said, there's a position that ministers shouldn't perform marriages that I found in a Puritan somewhere, and maybe we should allow for that. The other ones, like the instructions in 4, 5, 6, and 7, some people said, especially with the 7th one, like, I don't keep records. Am I going to be cited if I don't keep proper records of my marriages? And so it got to be so much of a debate about trying to wordsmith it, and we didn't have the times to rewrite all of Chapter 59. Eventually, there was a motion just to make it 59.3. First there was a minority report, and then we were sent back to say, give us a majority report that does something smaller. We settled on 59.3, but 59.3 at the time only said marriage is to be between one man and one woman. And so we did put in there, I believe, only put the scripture citations in there. And then there was also, we wondered, like, okay, this is saying almost exactly the same thing as Westminster. Does this even help? And I remember I was sitting next to a guy, I'll tell this story, Daniel Schrock, who used to be in the PCA, he's now in the OPC. He was sitting next to me in overtures, and he said, hey, should I make a motion to add a sentence to this, to make it clear that those are the only marriages that they can do? I was like, no, this is going so long, and nobody's going to have any kind of a desire to do anything like that. He's like, I think I'll do it. And so he stands up and just offers, therefore, ministers in the Presbyterian Church in America who solemnize marriages. So there he satisfied the guy that was like, well, what if they don't? Well, the ones who do shall only solemnize marriages between one man and one woman. And everybody loved it. And I was just like, never listen to advice from me again. Because I was like, nobody wanted to do that. And so that's how that sentence got in there. And it basically was almost unanimous. There's like 2 guys that didn't vote for it, one that wanted more, and one guy who was just like abstaining because he's like, I think we could do better. But everybody was okay with it. I think there's some sort of a narrative out there that said, wow, we couldn't even get all of Chapter 59. Well, there's reasons for that. It was weird, nitpicky reasons. Once we had 59.3, everybody was satisfied with it, thought it would be good enough cover for chaplains and also for pastors to be clear, like, you're not to go to this, you're not to bless this. Even if you're not the guy doing it, I think the message wanted to be sent, like, don't go to there to offer a prayer or something like that. You should, because that solemnizes the marriage. So we wanted to be clear, and I think that was achieved. even though there's probably some of us that would have liked to have seen more of the chapter done, but that's how we got out with 59.3. So that's way more than you wanted to know about 59.3, but there you go.
So 59.3 was doubled in size against Jared's wishes and constitutionalized. If Scott were here, I'd ask him what the numbers were on that whole thing, but I don't remember this being a very contentious vote from either GA or the presbyteries in the middle. I mean, how are you going to disagree with this? Is there anything else there? Let me click over to Morton and see what he says. Well, his was not as long before. He just I love Morton Smith's original because it was just one sentence. Oh, and there were no parentheticals back then. Morton just says, based upon the teaching of Jesus in Matthew 19, it is clear that marriage is to be monogamous and not polygamous. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go. Pear in his commentary references what you did too. He says he talks about it being in light of the legalization of same-sex marriage by the U.S. The 47th Assembly gave it full constitutional authority. Good. Okay, 59.4. The parties should be of such years of discretion as to be capable of making their own choice, and if they be underage or live with their parents, the consent of the parents or others under whose care they are should be previously obtained and well certified to the minister before he proceeds to solemnize the marriage. So, pastors shouldn't be marrying young people unless he gets permission from their older people, and people who are getting married should be old enough to choose to do so, more or less. But come on.
Yeah, this may sound a bit confusing, but it's almost like telling the pastor to do his homework.
Right.
To make sure that there's not some sort of illegal thing, to make sure you're not accidentally marrying, two 16-year-olds together, or that their parents aren't going to object, because that's even was part of the old, ceremony, if anybody has any objection. The original actually had a publication of the marriage that needed to happen before they would be married. And I think part of it was for objections. That's
further down, isn't it?
So in the original, it was in this section, in this paragraph. Oh, okay. I think it might have been put elsewhere as well.
It's in section 6 down here.
Yeah. But just the idea of doing your homework to make sure, this should come out in premarital counseling too, right? Have you been married before? Are you still married? Are you wanting me to do an ecclesiastical marriage that isn't civilly legal? These are important questions to ask, as well as consent of parents. Now, I think here the should is different than shall. And there may be circumstances where you're dealing with an exception here of parents that are not believers or aren't in the picture or aren't legal guardians. So this is good advice. This is really good advice. Follow this. There may be an exception to this somehow. I don't know. Something I haven't thought of. But
unfortunately, we live in an age where most people that are getting married much older than we would advise them to marry, and not necessarily much younger. So it's probably not something we run into a whole lot anymore.
Yeah.
59.5 is similar, right? Parents should neither compel their children to marry contrary to their inclinations, nor deny their consent without just and important reasons. I appreciate the implication here that parents are to be involved in the process, right? This is not only talking about children who are young, maybe 16, 17, 18-year-olds, but this is just talking about in general. Parents can't force their children to marry somebody that they don't want to marry, but they also shouldn't deny their blessing and consent when they, unless they have a very important and just reason to do so. But the whole sentence has this weight to it that parents are involved in their children getting married, and that there should be a significant part of the conversation leading up to it. As a dad, I appreciate that, right?
Yeah.
Don't know if my daughters will, but hopefully.
This was another paragraph, though. I remember during the debate, somebody wanted to just delete this paragraph in doing the whole chapter. And actually, the argument was interesting that the word inclinations has changed over time. And his concern was, what if you have somebody that said that they were same-sex attracted at one time? Now they're getting married. Is it wrong for them to say, we want to encourage you against what you said your inclinations were earlier? And so this could be confusing. So, but the word inclinations did not mean that back when it was original. And this is more of a, no forced or marriages, which is interesting. I was in seminary next to an Indian couple, and it was an arranged marriage by Christian parents. They had a lovely marriage. So I don't know if 59.5 is a little bit culturally relevant there, or is it about obeying and honoring your mother and father? That's an interesting conversation that it would be interesting to hear from somebody in a country where they have arranged marriages and see what they thought about that.
59.6, marriage is of a public nature. The welfare of civil society, the happiness of families, and the credit of Christianity are deeply interested in it. Therefore, the purpose of marriage should be sufficiently published a proper time previously to the solemnization of it. It is enjoined on all ministers to be careful that in this matter they obey the laws of the community to the extent that those laws do not transgress the laws of God as interpreted by the Constitution of the BCO, and that they may not destroy the peace and comfort of families. Ministers should be assured that with respect to the parties applying to them, no just objections lie against their marriage. I love the beginning of this. Marriage is of a public nature, and they identify three things that have a great interest in marriage, right? The welfare of society at large, the happiness of families, and the credit of Christianity. Marriage was the first society that God formed in the garden. It's the basis of everything in terms of societal existence these days. It forms happy families, right? If mom and dad are married and things are good, the family's good, generally speaking, right? There's contentedness and happiness. And the credit of Christianity, that has a lot probably to do with what Paul talks about in relationship to Christ and the church, and marriage being picture. Yeah. I mean, you jump in, Jared. I don't know what else you want to say about that, or we can talk about the publishing part.
Yeah, I think that's for some reason I thought of, I'm a good husband, so I will watch chick flicks with my wife occasionally. I was thinking of like Sweet Home Alabama, where she gets engaged, but she was still legally married, and so she had to like sort that out. So, you need to make sure you don't have a Sweet Home Alabama situation here where, you have to take care of the fact that they've been previously married, or, whatever it may be. So...
What counts as sufficiently published? I mean, if I tweet about it, does that count? Or has it got to be something more than that? This is so weird.
The original earlier actually says like 3 Sabbath days before, like it published, like basically announced in the church or something.
Oh, man.
So published by the minister 3 several Sabbath days in the congregation. So... I guess I assume like everybody in the community is at the church, so like everybody's here. So if we say it 3, but that'd be awkward. Like I didn't know this marriage was happening. It's like it was in the announcements. Like this has been a problem forever.
Yeah, people don't read the announcements.
Yep.
Also, then what happens if they don't get invited to the wedding? Like it's been published for a while, but then they don't get their invitation.
Mm-hmm. That's awkward.
Awkward. Yeah, I mean it's similar to what we've already talked about from 59.4. Ministers need to figure this stuff out. There's a part there about doing it lawfully, right, and in relationship to the laws that God's put in the land. And so, there's not really a whole lot to say there. I mean, do you say it up there? I say it down here when I marry somebody, in accordance with the laws of, this state, whatever.
Yeah, I say Commonwealth because I'm in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That? Yeah.
So fancy.
No, I'm just compliant with the directory and the language of Commonwealth. So
I've done. Well, it doesn't matter. In the weddings that I've done, I don't recall anybody at the court office certifying my ordination when I came to turn in the marriage certificate. Like anybody could have signed that and taken it in, and they probably wouldn't have asked any questions. It's very weird.
I think only if you get like an objection to it,
Okay.
So,
well,
to annul it or something.
Oh, right. They would come and check on it after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all right. This has been kind of short and sweet. We got one more section. 59.7. The minister should keep a proper register of the names of all persons whom he marries and of the time of their marriage, for the perusal of all whom it may concern. Yeah, we had a friend of ours ask us to consider 59.7 with a special question, and the question was simply, what's up with that? I mean, seriously. Like, I keep records of all these things. I keep records of baptisms, and I keep records of marriages, and then I keep a record of everything I teach, whatever context. But that's just because I'm weird and I like to keep track of things and to remember stuff. But it does seem odd that the minister should do this. Can you think of any reason why this would be in here?
This goes all the way back to the 1600s, the original. I don't know if they had county registers then, in England. And I don't know if you've ever done any research on your ancestors. After a while, you don't have government records. You have baptism certificates, and you have church marriage certificates. So there's a real the church in the 1600s was the record keeping place of the society. It only eventually do you have the government starting to keep track of birth certificates and wedding certificates after that. So I think this is coming from a time in which there was more of a responsibility for the church. So the people would come and peruse it for legal matters, right? They come to the church and you have a record there rather than at the county courthouse. And so I think it comes from that. Today you can make an argument for it just to keep good records in case somebody, wants to know, hey, when did this happen in this church and want to remember it. I don't think 59.7 is as essential as it used to be. In the 1600s, you better keep good records. Today, I've got a Google Drive folder that has all the weddings that I've done, but I don't have like a folder that's in my desk.
Our senior minister, when we get talking about baptisms and stuff, he says, I'm pretty sure I was baptized. We're like, what? He's like, my mom, when she was alive, she was getting pretty up there, but when he's like, well, my mom says I was. I'm like, okay. And he goes, but she doesn't have the certificate anywhere. So we like to tease him that maybe he's not really baptized. Fortunately, we're not Roman Catholics, and we don't have to invalidate his entire ministry as a result of that. But, keep track of things. That's all I'm saying. Sorry. I was trying the anecdote thing. Did it work? No? Didn't land well.
Well, what's the word for that? I don't know. Not a probationary baptism. I don't know if you do a baptism that's like just in case. I don't know.
Our people would think it was weird if I got up there one Sunday and baptized our senior pastor.
Just do it like Nacho Libre style, right? Just surprise him one day. You've not been baptized?
Oh boy. Well,
tell me you've seen that movie. You have to have seen that movie.
I have. It's been a long time, so I apologize.
Oh, you need to rectify that. That's like a yearly tradition in the Nelson household.
All right, listeners, that's marriage. That's our chapter on marriage. But I was gonna say, if my timing is correct, if the spreadsheet we have made is accurate, and if it's wrong, I blame it all on Scott, even though he hasn't looked at it in a long time. Starting next week, as you're listening, we should have some episodes on overtures coming out for the upcoming General Assembly. So it should be around the middle of May right now as you're hearing this, and close to the last week of May we'll be recording and releasing those. We expect we'll probably have a dozen episodes, I suppose, on overtures this year.
There might be a special episode in there somewhere too.
Yeah, and we should have a special episode coming out at some point. So just listen up and focus. And we're going to do some stuff on GA ahead of time. We might have a couple episodes for GA, like kind of prep besides overtures. We've done a lot of this in the past. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And then we'll probably have at least one episode of recap after the fact to kind of recount what takes place in Louisville. So if you're going to be at GA, as you're listening to this, definitely get in touch with us and let us know. We want to connect with you while we're there. Maybe we'll try to, I don't know. Maybe we'll try to put out some kind of announcement of where we're going to be at a certain point. We can all try to find each other and hang out a little bit. But Jared, I don't know. Anything else we need to do in terms of housekeeping?
I don't think so.
I think we
didn't share any great stories of our most embarrassing marriage or wedding.
Do you have one you want to share?
I don't.
My only fun line about marriages, I've only done 2 weddings in my whole ministry so far, and one of them was my mom and her now husband. So
you always have to get the
very
wording.
Interesting. Yeah, I married my mom.
Yeah, you have to get the wording of that right when people ask it.
I've done that wrong before. It's weird. Yeah. You married who? Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Keep moving. These are not the droids you're looking for. I suppose, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say, this podcast is over. So thank you for joining us. That ended weird. We've got show notes for you. Go down and take a look. Appreciate y'all sticking around. Appreciate those of y'all who support the show. We're in touch with most of y'all on a regular basis, and I think you know that we love you guys, and we're mindful that you make use of this and that you listen, and we just appreciate it so much. It's fun to do it, and if you've got ideas on what you want to see as we get close to the end of the book, let us know. Scott and I are starting to talk to Jared about what sunsetting Polity Matters might look like. Not permanently necessarily, but just, what life looks like after the BCO. We didn't set out to be podcasters. We set out to provide a resource on this subject matter. So if you've got thoughts or ideas about future content that would be valuable, talk to us. Let us know, text us, call us, whatever the case may be, and we'll be thinking about all those things.
Detailed commentary of the SJC manual.
Yeah, man. Oh boy, SJC manual. Parliamentary procedure, right? That's what everybody wants to listen to in their podcast player these days. SJC manual. What's the other one? The RAO. Ooh, yeah, fun stuff. That just makes me tired thinking about
the appendix. We need to do the appendix.
We do need to talk about the appendix. Yeah. We've got years and years of material.
Yes.
I don't know what I left out, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Jared, until next time, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Y'all take care.